So I'm just going to start this video off by saying, no, I will not be buying this camera. I, like pretty much every single person on the internet right now, have problem with this camera. I'm going to get into all that later, but for now, just hear me out for a second. So yeah, the FX2 was released yesterday and everybody seems to be up in arms about this camera. And to be honest, when the leaks came out a couple of weeks ago, I pretty much felt the same way as everybody else. It is kind of annoying to be getting a camera that has slow rolling shutter and a cropped 4K 60 frames per second in 2025. So it just seemed a bit underwhelming. We move forward to the actual release of the camera, and not only does it have the rolling shutter issues and the cropped 60 frames per second that everyone thought, but it didn't even have the 32-bit audio that was in the leak. And then when I looked into it a little bit, I also saw that it can only shoot RAW in APS-C crop mode. So for a more professional use case, it's essentially an APS-C camera. But then it hit me, this is basically an APS-C camera. So if you ignore the full frame aspect of the camera and just view it as an APS-C size camera, it's actually pretty decent. Real quick, let's just compare it to the FX30, for example. The FX2's got better dynamic range, better low light performance, a faster readout speed, better stabilization, it's got an EVF, better autofocus, it's a way better photography camera, and it can still do full frame if you want it to. Now, are those things worth $900 more than the FX30? Honestly, that's up to you to decide, but it does have a place in the market sitting between the FX30 and the FX3, and it's priced accordingly. So taking all that into consideration, why are people so mad about this camera? If I had to guess, I'd say it's a number of things, one of which is Sony's kind of been in a recycle phase for a while now. After the release of the a7S III, the a6700, and the a7 IV, they've kind of just been rehashing and repurposing those sensors, I messed that up, into different camera bodies for like the past 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer at this point. So taking that into consideration, I do feel like after 3 or 4 years, people are looking to upgrade. And since Sony kind of really hasn't had anything to offer in that aspect, I feel like those people may be feeling unheard by Sony. I don't know what direction Sony's going to be headed in, but to me, this release just feels like something that was tacked on at the tail end of their last generation of cameras before they move forward into the new generation. So as far as the cinema line goes, you had the a7S III, which became the FX3, you had the a6700, which became the FX30, and they had their other camera, which was the a7 IV, so then they just took that camera, put it into this one, and split the difference between the FX30 and the FX3. So it seems like at this point, I don't know what else Sony could possibly refresh, meaning that you have to expect at some point by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, you're going to start to see some of the new tech and features implemented into new cameras, aka Mark IIs of all the cameras you guys are clamoring for. So with that in mind, I think that people are probably mad because this looks like a low effort cash grab from Sony, because this is a low effort cash grab from Sony. But you can't really blame them because that's kind of what the FX3 was. I think people realized that at first, and then Sony kind of rectified that by not updating the a7S III in the same way they were updating the FX3. Even though it is 100% capable of all the same software updates that the FX3 can have, they needed to separate it in some way to justify one of them being more expensive than the other. But years later, people hail the FX3 as the best camera, and the a7S III's actually gone down in value. You also can't really blame them for recycling parts since every single camera company does this. I know right now we're at like the peak of Lumix versus Sony online, but Lumix has been doing this for like 5 years. The Lumix S1, the S1H, the S5, the S5 II, the S5 IIX, the S1 IIe all use the exact same sensor. They've repurposed it countless times. Sony's doing the same thing. Every camera company does the same thing. I don't really think that this is something to get mad over. And then I guess the last thing that people would probably be mad about is that they see other companies like Lumix and Nikon right now releasing newer cameras with newer specs and features, and they kind of feel like that the ecosystem that they're tied to is lagging behind. Now, as far as everybody screaming and shouting online about how much this camera sucks, I'm kind of on two minds as far as this goes. Like, on one hand, as long as it's constructive, I do feel like it's a good thing for companies to see that their consumers are not just complacent. Like, if everybody out there starts complaining about Sony not having OpenGate, eventually Sony's going to see that if they want to sell cameras still, they're going to have to start implementing OpenGate. On the other hand, though, it doesn't matter if you are being constructive or if you're being an unhinged lunatic. As long as the camera sells, Sony doesn't care. So for all the screaming and shouting you do, the loudest statement you can make to Sony is to simply not buy the camera. Which is exactly what I'll be doing, because even if I remove the rolling shutter and the frame rate options, so let's just call this strictly an APS-C camera, there are things about it that I still have an issue with. One of which is, why did Sony switch from having 2 CF Express A slots to just the one? I have no idea why they did that. I literally just kind of hounded the S12 for doing that, and then Sony's like, hey, that's a good idea, but I don't know, I haven't really seen much of an uproar about that in comparison to the frame rate. The frame rate issue really is what everyone seems to have an issue with. Another issue is the codec options. Still, I know that it's following in the previous generation of using all intra codecs as the best internal camera codecs. But as of right now in 2025, Nikon and Lumix and Canon, Blackmagic, Red, I don't even know if there's one camera company out there right now that doesn't have some form of internal RAW. And they're not even calling their cameras cinema cameras. I mean, we have iPhones that can shoot in ProRes and have false color. There's really no excuse for Sony's cinema line not to have that. I don't know how many people complain about that, but it's something that's important to me personally, and that's something I would really like to see implemented in the next generation of Sony cameras. So once again, though, it's got worse codec options than your iPhone. And the last thing is the EVF, which I don't hate the EVF. I just kind of wish that there was some way for it to be detachable. One of the main selling points of the Sony Cinema FX hybrid style bodies is the small form factor, and then this EVF kind of negates that. And lastly, for me, the biggest issue with the camera is the value proposition. At $2,700, I feel like that's too expensive for a camera with this many limitations. At least for me. I do see how it could be useful for some people though. So if you're asking me my opinion, if you want to be in the Sony ecosystem, I would personally recommend just picking up an FX30. With the extra $1,000, you can buy a lens or two to go along with the camera instead of just hopping right into this one. Or if you're just looking for a better camera in general, the S12 is a significantly better camera and it's only $500 more. But if you wanted a cheaper option, then the camera that I would recommend is the camera that I shoot on, which is the Lumix S52X. It can do everything that the FX2 can do, plus a lot more, and it's $1,000 cheaper at this point. Sponsor me, Lumix. I saw you liked my Instagram post. But if you want a more expensive and less capable version of the S52X, then maybe the FX2 could be your fun camera. Fun, of course, being the marketing term for overpriced. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm emotionally dead on the inside, but I've never used a camera before and thought of it as fun. Like, I've had fun on set and I've shot things that are fun, but I've never held a camera and thought of it as fun. I kind of just want the camera to do what the camera is supposed to do. I don't know. Maybe fun just means it looks cool. In which case, the Sigma BF is fun. I think it's marketed that way too. Anyway, whatever. This doesn't matter. Anyway, that's my opinion. Feel free to argue about it in the comments. Okay, bye.
Farewell, friends.